Hey guys, I got 3 things for you. Become a patron, like, and subscribe. Let's kick it off with making this spline cutting jig that will be an attachment for the Crosscut sled that will be a smooth complement to the miter jig that we made last time. Stay with me guys, it's coming up. Now, just like my miter jig that I made for the Crosscut sled, material list for this is going to be very minimal. This is what you'll need. You'll need enough 1/2-inch plywood to make the base, the 2 stabilizers that will go on the front and the back. Then you'll need some 3/4-inch plywood for the 2 tops and the 6 uprights. Now the hardware, you'll need to go to Rockler and pick you up a 4-foot stick of T-track, 4 star knobs with T-bolts, and some optional T-bolts with some T-knobs just for some stop blocks when you decide to make them. Now we're going to start where else but the Crosscut sled. Now I've got my dust collection already hooked up. I've got the plywood 1/2-inch thickness for the base already on the sled and clamped down with a hold down. Now we're just going to square up one edge, move it over, and then cut it to length. Now I'm just going to take another piece of 1/2-inch plywood and cut the 2 pieces for the front and back stabilizers. This will allow the blade to pass through the jig without the jig coming apart. Now the tops as well as the uprights are going to be made out of 3/4-inch plywood. The reason for that is because once the T-track is installed in the top, if I'd have done it out of 1/2-inch sheet plywood, there wouldn't be a lot of meat to screw to for the T-track. So I increased the thickness and that should take care of it. Now the uprights are going to also act as blade guards in the center of the jig. You'll see how that goes once we get it all assembled. Now with the miter jig we just made and clamped in place, we're going to use a hold down to hold our small little uprights in place to make the 45-degree angle that will hold the top and the notch 45-degree off the back corner. Now these little jokers are super important to the accuracy of this jig. You have to make sure that they are exactly 45-degree angle. Now what I have done is taken a speed square that's fairly oversized back here in the back and another one up here at the front of the sled. I've used some small hold downs just to keep them in place to where my board will actually just slide right down on them and into the kerf that's on my Crosscut sled. Now I know that these passes through, it will make a perfect 45-degree chamfer on the end of the wood. Just for some added safety, I've clamped the board to the speed square so it doesn't fall into the kerf after it makes the cut. Now that option worked really well. Now in order to make the jig a little more rigid, I need to notch out a little bit of area right here on the back of the uprights for the stabilizers on the front and back. Now the stabilizer is a 1/2-inch sheet of plywood. I'm going to find how deep I need to make a cut into these by doing a trick that I learned. Now all I've done is I've taken a piece of the 1/2-inch plywood that's the exact same thickness as the stabilizer, and I've put it over the kerf and held it down with one of these little hold downs. I'm just going to raise the blade up just a little bit at a time until it basically clips off the end of this wood right here in the center where the blade is going to cut. I don't really worry about anything left or right. I just want to be able to get it the exact thickness of this piece of wood. Now I'm going to use my old faithful trick to cut this just right. This is the stabilizer, so I'm going to use it as my gauge. My blade is right here, so what I'm going to do is take the piece of wood and butt it up against the blade and then make sure it's flush against my fence as well. Now take a stop block, put it right up against that, and then this is the piece I'm going to notch out. So I'm going to start from the bottom edge and go to this point right here. Basically, I'm going to cut the thickness of this by removing this and then pushing this over across the blade. Only problem is that I'm on this side of the blade, which will overcut by 1/8 of an inch on this side of the blade. So I need an 1/8 inch spacer to put right in between those two. So whenever I go to push that up against that 1/8 inch piece, it will push it to this side of the blade instead of this side, and it will be cut the exact thickness of the stabilizer. Now I'm going to do the same trick to get the height as well as the thickness of the stabilizer. I put it in between the blade and the stop block, and then I set the stop block where it needs to be, put my 1/8 inch spacer where it needs to be, and I've clamped my stock where it needs to be. Now because this 1/8 inch spacer is so close, and then once it clears this particular notch out, it's going to flip and flop around, and that brass piece may come in contact with my blade. So before I make my cut, I'm just going to remove the spacer. Since I have it clamped in place, it's not going to go anywhere. Now the next thing we have to do before we assemble a jig is to create the grooves using our dado stack and the table saw, which will accept our T-track. This is going to hold all of our stop blocks necessary to create accuracy on the jig. So with the miter side facing up, we'll run the piece through the dado stack to create our groove. Now just using my drill press, we'll drill out a 5/16 inch hole for the T-bolts. And we do this on both sides of the base. All these pieces are going to pretty much fit together like a puzzle. Now this is the top face down. There's our groove for the T-track. I've made marks here, here, and here for 3 uprights that will hold this piece up at a 45-degree angle. There's one right dead center because one of these uprights is going to act as a blade guard. So we've got to make sure that it is exact center. Now glue up is going to be really easy. We're going to use some rapid fuse glue from DAP to make this thing go together fairly fast, so we don't have to wait on glue time. I've got this piece centered up with a speed square, so now I know where to put it when I get to the edge. However, in order to make sure that it's bottomed out correctly with the edge, we're going to utilize another one of the pieces and put it right on the miter, flattened out up against the top as well as the upright, and then just hold it there until the glue sits. There you have the uprights glued in place. Now, while using a speed square and a bandy clamp, I'm going to hold that in place so I have a good reference to place my first top, and it will be exactly in line with the center of the base. Now because I know that this is perfectly square, I don't need a speed square for the next upright and top. I just butt it up against, make sure that it's flush, go ahead and set it down. Now here comes the real test. How square to 90 degrees is it? I'd say that's pretty dang good. Now the last piece is the backer. It also acts as the stabilizer and blade guard. Now after utilizing the table saw to cut some T-track, we're just going to super glue that into place and follow it up with a few screws. Alright, now it's time to give it a test run on the table saw. But first, we need to make a test piece. So, I've got my miter jig set up on the sled right now. So let's cut just an example of how we would use this. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this particular build on this attachment. If you guys want to download some plans and build one for yourself just like this to go with the sled, as well as the miter jig, feel free to visit my website. I'll leave a link down in the description below that'll take you straight to it. So guys, thank you very much. I will see you on the next build, and I hope you enjoyed it. 1, 2, 3, boom!
Bang, bang, won't stop till we're legend.